నమస్కారం. నేను వెంకట్ రెడ్డి కొత్త మన టీవీ న్యూ జెర్సీ నుంచి. ఇప్పుడు మనం మాట్లాడదాము కవిత గారితో. ఒక యుఎస్ సిటిజన్. తను కోవిడ్ సిచ్యువేషన్లో గత 40 రోజులు ఇండియాలో ఉండి ఒక వారం క్రితమే ఇండియా నుంచి యుఎస్కి వచ్చారు. కవిత గారు, మీరు ఇలాంటి క్లిష్టమైన పరిస్థితుల్లో ఇండియాలో ఉన్నారు. మీరు చూసింది, మీ అనుభవాలను చెప్పండి.
నమస్కారం. 40 రోజుల క్రితము ఇండియా బయలుదేరి వెళ్ళాము. ఇంతకు ముందు కంటే ఇండియా వెళ్ళే ఎక్స్పీరియన్స్ చాలా డిఫరెంట్ గా ఉండింది. ఇండియాకి వెళ్ళబోయే ముందు వి హ్యాడ్ టు టేక్ ఆర్టీపీసీఆర్ టెస్ట్. అది ఇండియన్ గవర్నమెంట్ మ్యాండేట్ చేసింది. ఆ ఆర్టీపీసీఆర్ టెస్ట్ లో నెగటివ్ వస్తే కానీ ఇక్కడ ఫ్లైట్ లో ఎక్కించుకోలేదు. సో ఫ్లైట్ ఎక్కే 72 hours ముందు ఆ టెస్ట్ తీసుకుని టెస్ట్ లో నెగటివ్ వచ్చిన తర్వాతనే ఫ్లైట్ ఎక్కాం అనమాట. ఫ్లైట్ ఎక్కే ముందు ఇక్కడ టికెట్ కౌంటర్ లోనే చెక్ చేశారు. రిజల్ట్స్ అవన్నీ నెగటివ్ ఉంటేనే దే లెట్ us in, they gave us boarding pass. లేకపోతే అక్కడే ఆపేస్తున్నారు. అట్లానే ఎయిర్లైన్స్ లో ఎయిర్పోర్ట్ కి వెళ్ళినప్పుడు కూడా టెంపరేచర్ చెకింగ్ అట్లాంటివన్నీ మెయింటైన్ చేశారు. అది యుఎస్ లో. ఇక్కడ యుఎస్ తర్వాత ఫస్ట్ స్టాప్ మాది ఢిల్లీలో దిగాము. ఇట్ వాస్ నాన్ స్టాప్ ఫ్లైట్ టు ఢిల్లీ. ఢిల్లీలో కూడా చాలా ఎఫిషియెంట్ గా దిగిన తర్వాత టెంపరేచర్ చెకింగ్, ఎక్కడ పడితే అక్కడ హ్యాండ్ శానిటేషన్ స్టేషన్లు ఉన్నాయి. టెంపరేచర్ చెకింగ్ తో పాటు టెస్ట్ రిజల్ట్స్ వెరిఫై చేశారు టు మేక్ ష్యూర్ అందరికీ నెగటివే వచ్చింది. హ్యావింగ్ దట్ టెస్ట్ బీయింగ్ డన్ ఇన్ యుఎస్ యాక్చువల్లీ వాజ్ ఎ గుడ్ థింగ్. ఎందుకంటే అది ఫ్లైట్ లో సేఫ్టీని ఎన్ష్యూర్ చేస్తుంది. ఇంతకు ముందు అక్కడ వెళ్ళిన తర్వాత టెస్ట్ తీసుకుని అక్కడ క్వారంటైన్ చేసేవారు, కానీ ఫ్లైట్ లో జరిగే స్ప్రెడింగ్ ఆఫ్ వైరస్ ని నివారించలేకపోయేవారు. Taking the test ahead of time really helped that. One more thing I want to add, ikkada international flights lo maskలు వేసుకుని కూర్చున్నాము throughout the time. తినేటప్పుడు మాత్రం తీయొచ్చు అని అనౌన్స్ చేశారు అండ్ అందరూ అదే ఫాలో అయ్యారు. కాకపోతే one good thing about domestic flights is domestic flights వాళ్ళు మాకు అక్కడ in addition face shields ఇచ్చారు. Again, this is to protect all the passengers and also the crew. It was very efficiently done by all the Indian airlines in India. It caused delays, kani this was a needed stuff. All these restrictions are mandated that were needed. Once we got home, what I saw ఏంటంటే మామూలుగా అందరూ వాలంటరీగా తగ్గించారు బయటకు వెళ్ళటం. అత్యవసర పరిస్థితుల్లో తప్పితే బయటకు వెళ్ళటం లేదు, విచ్ వాస్ గుడ్. అండ్ అక్కడ ఉన్న మాల్స్ కానీ ఎక్కడికి వెళ్ళినా అన్ని దగ్గరలా కూడా టెంపరేచర్ చెకింగ్ అన్ని దగ్గరలా జరిగింది. నార్మల్ అయితేనే లోపలికి పంపిస్తున్నారు అండ్ అన్ని దగ్గరలా శానిటేషన్, మాస్క్ మ్యాండేట్లు అన్ని దగ్గరలా చూసాను. So this is completely different. Of course, సంవత్సరంన్నరగా నేను ఇండియా వెళ్ళలేదు, ఫస్ట్ టైం. This is a major change that I observed.
థ్యాంక్ యూ కవిత గారు, మీ అనుభవాల్ని మాకు తెలిపినందుకు. మీరు పర్సనల్గా మీ ఫ్యామిలీ కానీ మీ ఫ్రెండ్స్ కానీ ఎవరైనా ఎలాంటి సంఘటనలు ఏమైనా ఎదుర్కొని వాళ్ళు ఎలా డీల్ చేశారు, ఇండియాలో ఎలా పరిస్థితులు ఉన్నాయో ఒకసారి చెప్తారా?
అబ్సల్యూట్లీ అండి. సో బయట పనుల కోసం వెళ్ళినప్పుడు వెళ్ళవలసి వచ్చింది, చిన్న చిన్న పనుల కోసం. ఇందాక మాల్స్ గురించి చెప్పాను కదా, అట్లాగనే ఏ ఆఫీసులకి బ్యాంకులకి వెళ్ళినా వాళ్ళు రెస్ట్రిక్షన్ పెట్టారనమాట. ఇంతకు ముందు ఫ్యామిలీ లైక్ నేను మా అమ్మని కానీ మా చెల్లిని కానీ తీసుకెళ్తే అందరం వెళ్ళగలిగే వాళ్ళం లోపలికి. కానీ ఇప్పుడు కొత్తగా రెస్ట్రిక్షన్ అంటే ఒకళ్ళు మాత్రమే లోపలికి రండి, మిగతా వాళ్ళు బయటే ఉండండి అట్లాగా పెట్టారు. సో 3-3.5 వారాలు ఉండి తిరిగి వచ్చేద్దాము, వచ్చేప్పుడు అమ్మని తీసుకొద్దామని వెళ్ళాము. వచ్చే ముందు 72 hours ముందు టెస్ట్ తీసుకోవాలి. అగైన్ ఈ ప్రికాషన్ యుఎస్ గవర్నమెంట్ పెట్టింది. అక్కడ RT-PCR టెస్ట్ తీసుకుని నెగిటివ్ వస్తేనే మళ్ళీ ఫ్లైట్లో ఎక్కాలి. సో RT-PCR టెస్ట్ తీసుకున్నప్పుడు మాకు నెగిటివ్ వచ్చింది. ఫర్ సమ్ రీజన్ మా అమ్మగారికి పాజిటివ్ వచ్చింది. సంథింగ్ దట్ ఐ కేమ్ టు నో, range of value is between 25 and 35 అంట. 35 and above ఉంటే negative, 25 below ఉంటే positive definitely. Anywhere in between is transitional అనమాట, varying of COVID symptoms అని. అమ్మకి మధ్యలో వచ్చింది, so she got mild symptoms. Positive thing is mild గా వచ్చింది. So one thing is we couldn't travel right away. తర్వాత ఒకటి చేశాము, అనవసరంగా హాస్పిటల్స్ కి వెళ్ళటము, డాక్టర్స్ ని కలవటం కూడా తగ్గించారు ఇండియాలో. అనవసరంగా అంటే ఇది అత్యవసర పరిస్థితుల్లో కూడా ఎట్లా తగ్గించాలి అని చూసుకుంటున్నారు. సో ద ఫస్ట్ థింగ్ వి డిడ్ వాజ్ అక్కడ డాక్టర్స్ ని కన్సల్ట్ చేయటానికి నా అన్ని వర్చువల్ గా కన్సల్ట్ చేయొచ్చు. సో వీడియో కాల్ ద్వారా అపాయింట్మెంట్ తీసుకుని వి కన్సల్టెడ్ ఎ డాక్టర్ రైట్ అవే. మెడికేషన్ లిస్ట్ ఇచ్చారు, అన్ని వాట్సాప్ ద్వారానే పంపిస్తూ ఉన్నారు, ప్రిస్క్రిప్షన్ అన్ని. అట్లాగనే డ్రగ్ స్టోర్స్ కూడా వాళ్ళకి కాల్ చేస్తే ఏ డ్రగ్స్ ఉన్నాయా లేవా చెప్పగలిగారు, వెళ్ళి పికప్ చేసుకోవటము, అట్లాంటివన్నీ ఉన్నాయన్నమాట. సో చాలా వరకు రిమోట్ గానే అంటే వర్చువల్ గానే అవుతూ ఉన్నాయి, ఎక్సెప్ట్ ఫార్ పిక్ చేసుకోవాల్సి వచ్చినప్పుడు ఇన్ పర్సన్ వెళ్ళి కర్బ్ సైడ్ ఎవరు లేనప్పుడు వెళ్ళి తీసుకురావటం అట్లాగే. స్లోగా గవర్నమెంట్ కూడా రెస్ట్రిక్షన్ పెట్టింది, ట్రావెల్ ఆర్ 12 లోపు మాత్రమే బయట ఉండాలి, 12 తర్వాత కర్ఫ్యూలు అట్లాంటివి పెట్టింది. సో చాలా వరకు పనులు ముందే అయిపోతున్నాయి. అత్యవసర పనులు ఉంటే తప్పితే, లైక్ ఫార్మసీ అట్లాంటివి వెళ్ళటం తప్పితే, హాస్పిటల్ కానీ ఫార్మసీ కానీ ట్రావెల్ కానీ ఏదైనా తప్పితే చాలా వరకు ఇంట్లోనే ఉన్నారు. సో ఈ కారణంగా అదే కోవిడ్ టెస్ట్ రావడం, ఆమెకి కోవిడ్ టెస్ట్ పాజిటివ్ కారణంగా నా 3.5 వారాలు అవ్వాల్సిన స్టే అక్కడ 40 రోజుల వరకు అయ్యింది. తిరిగి రావటానికి చూస్తూ ఉన్నప్పుడు ఫ్లైట్స్ కూడా క్యాన్సిల్ అయినాయి, ఎందుకంటే అప్పుడు ఇండియా ట్రావెలర్స్ మీద ఇంకా రెస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ పెరిగిపోయినాయి. వేరే కంట్రీస్ ట్రాన్సిట్ ప్యాసింజర్స్ ని కూడా రానివ్వలేదు. So the only opportunity we had was India నుంచి డైరెక్ట్ గా US ఉన్న ఫ్లైట్స్ వితౌట్ ఎనీ స్టాప్ ఓవర్ తీసుకుని రావాల్సి వచ్చింది.
ఓకే, థ్యాంక్ యూ. ఇక్కడ సిమిలర్ రెస్ట్రిక్షన్స్ US లో కూడా ఉన్నవి. ఇప్పుడు థింగ్స్ బెటర్ అయ్యి మనకు సోషల్ డిస్టెన్సింగ్ ఇవన్నీ ఫాలో అవుతున్న, కర్ఫ్యూ లాంటివి ఏం చూడలేదు. సో డాక్టర్ సుజంతి ఎస్ రాజారాం, MD, MPH, FACP, FAASM, FCCM, clinical professor of medicine, critical care intensivist from New Jersey state of the USA. And she has treated thousands of patients here in the US in the last 1.5 years. Hello, Dr. Sujanti. Thank you for joining us in the talk show.
Hello, namaskaram.
So we hear a lot of information about coronavirus and their new strains. Can you please educate us with some basics of these virus variants?
Yes. So the virus, coronavirus, is a SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the new variant, new virus, which started only in 2019. So the first time any virus, usually they evolve over time and then it becomes a variant or a mutant. So the mutation is called changing in their genetic code, which happens to almost all the viruses, all the flu viruses, or any virus. And viruses with one or more new mutations, then you call it as a variant. So the variant is important because it affects the way the virus transmits itself and then the severity. Suppose the severity can get worse, or the transmission may be very rapid or evolve very fast transmission. Sometimes some of the variants and some of the viruses, when they mute, the severity can go down and then transmission rate can go down also. But the SARS-CoV-2 virus, especially the Indian variant, which we talked about, has a rapid transmission rate and the severity of the illness was also very high. So basically in SARS-CoV-2, the mutations are at the spike protein, which we call, and that's what like different variations happened. And India had this B1617 variant, which is currently reported to be present in almost like 40 nations so far. But not only the India had the variant, almost every country has now started with UK variant, and there is South Brazilian variant and South African variant. So there are different countries have different variations of the reported, including small countries are reporting significant variations and mutations in this virus. So the basically the bottom line is like all these variations, the severity is going to be different, and overall the transmission rate is going to be a little bit different than the original virus from Wuhan.
Yeah, this makes us think about what kind of precautions can we take against these variants, and compared to many countries in the world, India not only has the second largest population, but also has a very high density. And in these conditions, what are the best precautions one can follow to avoid the spread of virus?
Yeah. So basically, when you try to protect yourself and the country or a community from a virus which is very virulent, number one, and then second thing is like it's spread very fast and it's airborne, in other words. So, so the main precautions which you take is like every person should think about self-protection. So how to protect yourself from this infection personally. So personally, so when you're outside the home or anywhere else, if you are exposed to virus, the virus enters the body through your eyes, nose, or mouth. So that's what is very, very important to avoid touching the face, especially and unwashed hands. That's number one. It's important for self-protection before you go into the community. Number two is the frequent hand washing. The hand washing is with soap and water is pretty good enough. And like it's recommended to at least wash for 20 seconds. Cleaning the hands in the alcohol-based solutions or gels or tissues. Those are all possible, but soap and water is more than enough, but it's important to wash 20 seconds, including the rest area and all. And the important thing, how to protect the infection, it's not only self-protection, protecting the others, how to spread this infection. Suppose if you get the infection or even if you're exposed to the infection, majority of them are going to be asymptomatic, meaning that you don't even know that you have an infection. So during the pandemic, every person has to stay away from an infected person, number one. Suppose if you know that somebody is infected or somebody is exposed, avoid that person, or the self-quarantining is very important if you have been exposed. And also avoid having close contacts with anybody who is infected, which is very, very important. Even if you're family members, then you have to maintain a 1 meter distance from yourself to reduce the risk of infection, particularly when they're coughing or when they're talking or sneezing, because the virus can spread, it's airborne. So even greater distance is much more important, especially when they are sneezing or when they are indoors. That is very, very important. Number three is like avoid social gathering to protect everybody. That is very important in this situation because avoid physical meetings, social gathering, especially to prevent community transmission. So that's where the pandemic became like more widespread, and then it became a second wave. And the third thing is like the fourth thing important is like whenever you are with other people or outside, you must wear a mask. Use a face mask is very, very important. Either indoors or outside, whenever people are around, then you should use the physical distancing as well as face mask. Then like the virus cannot spread when you're talking or sneezing or from you to the other person. And also it will protect yourself from getting infection from the air, basically. So make sure that when you're wearing a face mask, you cover your nose, mouth, and chin. The whole important areas has to be covered. And also it's important when you're taking off the mask. Suppose like if you wear a mask and go outside and then exposed to an infected person's virus, it comes and sit on your outside of the mask. So you should not be touching the mask all the time with your hands. And then the taking the mask off is very important. When you put a mask on, you take it off without touching the outside of the mask. And then either if it's a fabric mask, you're going to wash it, means put it in the plastic bag and then dispose it or wash it, or take off the mask and throw it out. And also it's recommended not to use that mask with the valves. Those virus can spread through that. So those are the main important things, like how to protect the family and friends and the community is like using a face mask, physical distancing, and self-isolation. Suppose if you're infected or if you're exposed, that is important, or if you have any symptoms of possible COVID infection during the pandemic, even if you don't know whether you're exposed or not. Suppose if you're having cough, fever or sore throat or runny nose, you should isolate yourself before you test yourself. So those are the self-protection and protecting the others. And also you have to make sure the environment is safe. So the important thing, like for the environmental safety, is recommended to avoid 3 C's, if you remember. The spaces that are C's, like closed, then you avoid that space. So obviously the households with a closed households, only one person or 2 people can stay if it's a closed space. So that's what most of the offices are closed at this time. The schools are closed. And avoid crowded areas. If it's crowded areas, absolutely there's a no. And involving any close contacts, those are the 3 C's should be avoided, because the outbreaks have happened in restaurants and choir practices or fitness classes or in nightclubs and in offices. Those are major outbreaks happened. So that's avoiding those spaces should be very, very important. So if you're at home, and if you're self-isolating, the important protection method you have to use is opening up the windows is very important, because this is an airborne virus. It's in the air. You cannot see that. So open up the windows. And some people, if you have the capacity to use filters for the air conditioners, which is okay to use it. If you look at the COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2, the size is about 0.125 microns. It's describing it's almost like 125 nanometer. And the HEPA filters are 0.01 microns. So it'll filter out if you use that is some filters have very high capacity to filter out even the viruses. So that's very, very important. If you're using, but the simple technique is keeping the windows open so air goes out. If you use the analogy, if you have a smoking person, somebody smokes inside the closed space, that smoke, you could see that at least, or you could smell. But the virus, if it's there, you cannot see or smell, but it's around and it'll get to you. So that's what keeping the windows open is one of the best choices during this time if you're self-isolating at home in a small space. And cleaning up the space, of course, especially the areas which the person who is self-isolating touches most often, say their phone, doorknobs and all, those are very, very important, not to clean them very clearly all the time. And other people do not touch those areas. So basically you're completely isolating yourself, and the caretaker has to self-isolate themselves also. They don't have to be staying inside the room, just drop the food or give the food and leave. And those utensils have to stay inside and don't use it. The same person, whatever the utensils, whatever they touches, this caretaker cannot be using it. It's almost like in the hospitals, what we do, that the caretaker also recommended to use the N95 mask, when you're going in. Otherwise, for the person who are isolating himself or herself is infected, so the caretaker can get the virus, which is very, very important. So those are the main protective measures which can bring this pandemic to a hold, or at least it can decrease the pandemic spread.
Thank you, Dr. Sujanti. This was a good list of precautions and the cautiousness that people should be aware of. And I especially like the analogy that you gave that if somebody is infected, it's like they are smokers, and you can easily identify that how to avoid them, how to avoid passive smoking. Similarly,
Yeah,
with this virus, it's going to be even more dangerous that we cannot smell it, but we should
yeah,
be much more cautious than that. Now, if currently the situation is people are so scared
yeah.
that they are doubting every symptom that they see and they're relating to coronavirus. So, can you please educate us on what are the various symptoms one should watch out?
Symptoms, like, is a variety of symptoms. If you look at SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID-19 infection, majority of them, young people or people who have no comorbid conditions, are going to be asymptomatic. Nobody will have any symptoms, and they are the one who are super spreaders too, because the people who have no symptoms, they are spreading the virus without knowing that they are sick. So a significant number of people are going to be asymptomatic. And the popular belief was it was a respiratory illness at the beginning. It is not only a respiratory illness, it's a multi-system disease now. It's a multi-organ inflammatory syndrome. It's called a MIS-C in children or MIS-A in adults, multi-system inflammatory syndrome, because it's affecting a lot of systems in the body. Because the reason is this virus causes a little bit significant oxidative stress in the body. That's like, your oxygen supply goes down to the person, means basically at the cellular level, you uh, you lack oxygen. That's what, like, it's affecting the entire system, not only the respiratory illness. It starts some people with the respiratory illness. So there are, if you're starting with a respiratory illness, it could be mild, moderate, or severe. So it can be a spectrum of flu-like illness and not a pneumonia. You can get a flu, or some people get a walking pneumonia. And those are the people who doesn't require any oxygen or anything. They pretty much recover. Those are the majority of the people. It's about 81% of them with mild symptoms. And about 15% then progress to severe symptoms with oxygen supply goes down to them. And those are the people we are more worried about. And then critically ill patients who require intensive care unit with severe organ failure or respiratory illness is about 5%. So if you go through like the symptoms, common symptoms, if you look at it, like they're going to come with like either fever, cough, or you're producing sputum, you're fatigued, you're tired, problem with the sleep, you have insomnia, and some people problem with like a neurological symptoms like smelling goes off, like anosmia, then anorexia, the appetite goes down. Some people come with chest tightness, so chest symptoms. Shortness of breath is one of the important things. If you're coming with the neurological symptoms, headache, and then you can have sore throat, diarrhea, or abdominal pain. There are symptoms with the GI symptoms, nausea, vomiting. And with the fever, you could have chills, shivering, and cardiac symptoms. There are people presenting with cardiac illness also, which is again with the chest pain or heart attacks. So the respiratory illness progressed to cardiac illness, or not progress to, like, in addition to that, you can have like rhythm disturbances. We've seen like a lot of people with heart rate going down or different arrhythmias, or they can develop myocarditis. The muscles get affected, or pericarditis, or the pericardium or the surrounding of the heart gets affected, fluid fills. People get heart attacks with this COVID infection also, because like it behaves like your coagulation abnormalities happens in these people. Like the it's a procoagulant effect, and your blood thinning effect or clotting factors goes up, and then people do develop clots in various parts. Suppose if you develop clots in the lung, then it's called pulmonary embolism. If you're clotting the vessels which supply the heart, you're taking myocardial infarction or heart attacks. So those are the coagulation abnormalities, and the neurological symptoms are pretty pronounced. People do develop strokes. when you have clots in the brain. And initially, the neurological manifestations were like smell goes off. That is pretty common. It's called anosmia. And then headaches, dizziness, and people have developed seizures with this virus coming with a stroke alone, or mental status changes. Just we called it as an encephalopathy, because like your the covering of the brain gets inflamed, and then people do develop different encephalopathy and then altered mental status, which is not uncommon. And so those are the major, and encephalitis or inflammation. The kidneys gets affected too, because that's part of the complications of when you have COVID infection, or the kidneys can be affected. So most of these asymptomatic patients who are progressing to severe illnesses with multi-system organ damages, only some particular people are at high risk. That's very, very important to isolate those high risk people. Suppose if you have diabetes, you're at certainly very high risk. You're not going to be unlikely to be asymptomatic. You might develop severe disease or mild disease to moderate, can progress. Hypertension or high blood pressure, that is one of the comorbid condition. Or if you have renal disease, kidney diseases already, or lung disease, like a chronic obstructive lung disease, which happens in people who are smokers, or if you're an asthmatic. And one of the important risk factors is obesity, the body weight. Obesity itself is a high risk factor for SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 infection. And people who have cancer, because their immunity is down, so they won't be able to fight with the infection. Their innate immunity of the natural killer cells, so natural immunity is not there because of the treatment or cancer itself. And it's affecting more older adults because as you get older, that your immunity goes down, and it's affected more older adults because they have more comorbid conditions also. And also it's well seen that it's predominantly affected more males compared to the females. Also, there was some data about that also. So those are the people who would develop those severe symptoms, which we discussed, other than asymptomatic.
Yeah, these symptoms are going to be very important, and every individual should be aware of these symptoms and constantly be conscious about these things, because acting immediately on these symptoms and trying to restrict or constrain the virus is important. So doctor, if one identifies that he has these symptoms, what are the immediate actions he need to take so that he is less affected by it and also doesn't spread to the rest other people?
Yeah. So suppose if you have symptoms, and then like any flu-like illness during the pandemic, obviously you need to test yourself and see whether you are infected or not. So that's the important testing comes up. That's number one. So if you are infected, immediately self-isolation, if you do not have major symptoms, because majority of them, like in 10 to 14 days, if you do self-isolate and stay away, you won't spread the disease, and you will recover from like a flu-like illness, like any other viral illness. But if you are a diabetic, all these comorbid conditions which we just talked about, if you have a hypertensive patient or anyone, then you need to worry about it. You need to have a closer eye on it and watch all these symptoms, especially if you're getting more and more short of breath, then you need to go to the hospital. One thing it's recommended, if you could have the capacity to monitor your oxygen saturation by using a pulse oximeter, which is available nowadays very widely, then you could use that pulse oximetry and then maintain the oxygen saturation should be above 90%. Ideally, like you would want like above 94%, but if it's less than 90%, then you should like really bring yourself to the hospital to get some oxygen. Suppose if you don't have a pulse oximeter, you can always look at the color of the person. Like, anybody who's turning blue or ash color, then you know that like the lips and then oral mucosa areas turning blue, then their oxygenation levels have gone down significantly. Before that happens, oftentimes you would notice they become very, very short of breath and their breathing rate has gone up. Then you're really sick. Or any other symptoms with any of the organs which we talked, if they are confused or if they're altered or having chest pains, then definitely they are getting worse and they need to go to the hospitals. But if you're a mild case, there are some places that you have monoclonal antibodies available, which are not like standard of treatment if it is available. And if you have comorbid conditions, you could use them. If anybody give the monoclonal antibodies, if you have the capacity or availability, then that helps preventing or like progressing to a severe disease, which was the one popularly used for our ex-president when he got sick with COVID. So those are available. Other than that, you self-isolate and stay home. And there are some other measures which are being popularly used, which is okay to utilize if you're staying home. But it's not recommended to start taking antibiotics if you are, unless it's prescribed by a physician for a secondary infection. There's no need because this is a viral infection. So it's not required unless you have a secondary viral infection, secondary bacterial infection from viral infection. And if you're getting worse, obviously getting a chest x-ray is very important to see whether you have pretty bad pneumonia or not, if you're progressing. If not, stay home. And when you're getting better, if you don't require oxygen, you don't even need steroids because that'll worsen your overall outcome by suppressing the immunity further. If you're not required steroids, you don't need to take them. Some supplements are not like, these are not standard from randomized control trials we are talking about, but these are different ways, like an adjuvant treatment options people could use, like supplements. Say, for example, the one popularly used was zinc supplements, copper and manganese, not because like we have enough studies available on COVID infections, because those have anti-inflammatory and antiviral properties, especially zinc and copper. It correlates with the strong antioxidant state of the body. And manganese and copper works as cofactors to during inflammatory states, like to counteract the infection. So manganese plays a role in mitochondrial homeostasis also. So those are recommended, like not medically per se, that people are using it. So it's okay to use because if you don't have any harm, and then those are cofactors, you can use it, especially vitamin C. So anybody like with a respiratory illness, it may potentially play a role in reducing the inflammation during a respiratory infection. And especially that's an interleukin-6 inhibitor. It can play a role there. So it may reduce the inflammation. So vitamin C in respiratory illnesses have enough studies that it helps. So you can take vitamin C. And also the vitamin D is another one, because like it's been enough studies that as an adjunctive treatment, it was linked to if you have deficiency, it's linked to high incidence of respiratory infections for vitamin D deficiency. And vitamin D deficiency is very common in Asian population. So it also is modulate the reaction to infection, how you react to an infection. If you don't have a deficiency, then you'll react it better. Vitamin D plays a key role in the immune system with the macrophages and reactive oxygen species. So in COVID infection, something called reactive oxygen species is the one which is coming up. And then especially those are high in patients who are obese or high blood pressure patients or patients with heart disease. So that's linked to that. So vitamin D play a key role in there. So it may help. And also in response to an infection in vulnerable populations, especially older people, deficiency of vitamin D, they're at particular risk for respiratory infections. So again, COVID-19 is a respiratory illness and it's infection. And in other respiratory illnesses, also in COVID-19, there were some reports that prevalence and mortality in older individuals were associated with vitamin D deficiency. So there are reports that, and it itself is a poor marker. Deficiency is a poor marker for acute respiratory failure while you're having COVID infection. So it's okay to take it. So standard dosing about 4,000 to 5,000 units per day should be more than enough. And even though it's a fat soluble vitamin, it doesn't cause major side effects, except in some patient population will be more careful, like sarcoidosis or anybody, but other people can take it. Other than that, if you have fever and no other major symptoms, you can take some fever reducing agents, although temperature, high temperature and the fever is playing a protective role. It's a protective mechanism to counteract this viral illness. But if you have like trouble keeping the temperature high, then you could take any fever reducing agents or any mucus reducing agents for the upper respiratory infections can be used. And there are some reports about hot baths and sauna. Heat saunas have a better outcome in viral illness, especially COVID infections and even high temperature, like similar to how fever is a protective mechanism. So hot baths, if you have the capacity to take very hot baths, we could take it even as a preventive measure that can be done also. So those are the pretty much methods people could use if they have symptoms and mild disease. The main thing people should realize is should not go to the hospital if you don't have symptoms. Especially there, you might have, you can spread the disease more, and then the hospital beds could be utilized for people who truly need those beds. 80% of them can take care of themselves at home with proper precautions they make. The same precautions you do it like when you get infected also.
Thank you. Like Dr. Sujanti has advised us, it's not only important that we are aware of the symptoms and keep an eye on that, but also act immediately when you find some symptoms, not to rush to the hospital, but follow the advice that the doctor has said. Now, I have a question, doctor. It's not me, but one of my family members gets affected and we live together. Then what are the precautions that I can take to contain it?
So if one of your family member already infected, and then basically then you're exposed already, because what time? Because this viral infections takes about 1 to 3 weeks, like to become symptomatic also, right? So there's something called an incubation period. So if you are during that incubation period, you may be infected. So main thing is to protect yourself. You have to, not only yourself and other family members, immediately you need to self-isolate. That's a very important part, self-isolation. And the same precautions like mask wearing, hand hygiene, take care of the infected one. If you're doing it, like still you need to self-isolate, keep the windows open, keep your environment safe, means if your household. So a lot of people sanitize their homes. If you have the capacity to sanitize, it's okay. But keeping the windows open will be very, very important. It's hard in the US during the winter time, but other places, it's an easy task to do. And then when you're self-isolating for the next 14 days, you should test yourself also, see at what point you're getting infected or not, whether you're positive or you're like asymptomatic carrier. That is very important. And otherwise, the same measures which we just discussed about how to prevent the spread and how to take care of yourself and the infected person. If you have a pulse oximetry available for the infected person, you can give it to them. But if they are sick, then they need to be taken to the hospitals. The important thing which I noticed was many general population, they are not realizing that if a loved one is infected, you cannot be closer to them, because like either you're going to infect yourself, not only infect yourself, and you're going to infect other people in the household if you go closer to them. So that's very, very important, that maintain that social distance with the infected person and completely isolating them. And also, you can do a contact tracing to see which are the people that person who's infected has already was in contact within the last week, and then you may need to inform them that they have been exposed to a COVID infection, so they can take the same precautions.
Yeah, true, absolutely. It is not only the duty of the patient, but who is living with them also have their own duty to make sure that they don't contain it and also don't spread it. So we have to follow what the doctor is saying. And as we all know that this coronavirus is novel, it's new, it's evolving. And doctor, the question that I have is, there are so many cases that we are seeing, like black fungus, fatigue, headaches, after the patient actually completely recovers.
Yes.
Can you throw some light on that, on what needs to be done?
Yes. So the black fungus, it's called mucormycosis. So it's a mold. It's a fungus. It's in the group of Mucormycetes group. So basically, this fungus lives in the soil, and it lives in the decaying organic material. So it mainly affects the people who does not have great immune system. So if you're immune suppressed or if immunity is going down, then it's going to affect. So COVID infection itself can bring your immunity down significantly. So immunity goes down. But most important thing is, like, if you were to get admitted to the hospital, and one of the treatment option is steroid use. Steroid use itself can bring the immunity down, but that's one of the important factor which is used in the COVID infection is steroids. Only if you need oxygen, or if you're really ill, and if you're ventilated, or if you're mechanically ill or severe COVID infection, we use steroids. So if you start using steroids sitting at home without any serious symptoms, so you are suppressing your immunity significantly. And also it will affect the immunocompromised people, like who have history of cancer or any type of immune compromising drugs. Like if you have a rheumatological illness and if you're on immunocompromised drugs, those people can be affected. So anybody who is in an immunocompromised state, this fungus can infect them. So it's a fungal infection. It could be life-threatening. Even though it's a rare disease, it's an opportunistic infection, basically. The mortality rate exceeds it could be anywhere from 46 to 96%. So it's about exceed 50% of mortality, means the death rate. So once a fungus infects, the death rate is very high. And it can affect which organ it's affecting is important. Suppose something called a rhinocerebral mucormycosis. That means like you come with like fever, some facial swelling, one part of the face is swollen, have headaches and sinus infection signs like a nasal congestion, then it's affecting that part of then it becomes the black mucus developed through the nose. You can see that also fungus. So that's cerebral mucormycosis. And the lungs, if it's affected, you develop obviously cough, shortness of breath, and chest pain. If it's affecting the GI system, then people are going to develop nausea, vomiting, or abdominal pain. They can have bleeding also from the GI tract. So the important thing is, it is not like COVID infection per se. It's not going to spread from person to person. Suppose if you were in the hospital with a COVID infection, or if you're not in the hospital and you decided to take steroids, and if you're immunocompromised otherwise also, then if you develop this infection, it's a secondary infection, opportunistic infection, but it doesn't transmit to another person in the household if you're infected. It's not contagious, in other words. It goes by inhaling those mold spores from the soil or from the decayed material. So that's how it spreads. So which are the people at risk for this? Obviously, diabetic patients, the immunity is low. If you're using steroids for other reasons, then you're compromised. If you're on chemotherapy, then you're going to be high risk for this. But there are treatments available, antifungal agents like amphotericin B or posaconazole. All of them are available. But in severe cases, may need to remove surgically the area which is affected, or the dead tissue needs to be removed. Then it's quite disfiguring for the patient also. And it's a serious illness if you get it, even though it's rare. Like compared to other opportunistic infection, this is a pretty serious fungal infection if you get it. So I hear that there are significant reports coming up. Its incidence is much more higher in India than before with this mucormycosis or fungal infection. So need some studies to see why, possibly like inadvertent use of steroids may be contributing.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you for all this information. Let me ask you a few questions which are very intuitive and searched very frequently on the internet.
Yes.
The first one is, we see different types of tests for coronavirus like RT-PCR, rapid tests. Which one is preferred in what situations?
There are different types of tests available, and the main thing is like we need to understand what type of test these are. So that depends on where the viral load is coming up. If I could share my screen, I could just see whether, if you could see this one. So I just want to show the screen saying that, like, how the viral load is. So when the virus gets infected, so there's at the beginning of the period, it's called a pre-infectious period, but your viral load is going up. And then like the next stage is infectious period. So where the viral load is very high. And then like the viral load goes down. So it depends on where we are testing and what test we are using it. So at the beginning, like, rapid antigen testing is one of the tests popularly used, is which usually detects this test detect the viral protein. So if you know the virus structure, it has an mRNA and then surrounded by a protein core. So the rapid antigen test, which tests the viral proteins, so which has less sensitivity, which is about like over 55-60%. But at the same time, if you have a viral load, which is high enough to infect other people, that becomes invariably positive all the time. So when you're doing a rapid antigen testing, which is against viral proteins, if it is positive, that person is highly infectious. Definitely that's acute infectious period diagnosis. So the RT-PCR is which detects the viral mRNA. So the core inside the body of the virus, it detects. So the RT-PCR can be positive even if you're pre-infectious period, sometimes for short period of time when the viral load is coming up. But then during the period of highly infectious time, when you're acute infection also, it could be positive because already the viral mRNA, the virus is replicating. And then it could be positive even after post-infectious period, RT-PCR, because it's detecting the viral mRNA. So it could be positive even later stages also. So those are the two tests mainly used. And the other one is using the antibody testing. Antibody means like, whether you developed a fighting mechanism against the virus. So which is a protective mechanism. When you have antibodies, you're already either infected, or different type of antibodies means like they already have vaccinations. Those are the two things which means. But we have the capacity here to differentiate both, but on average, either you're infected or you have vaccinations if you have antibody positive.
I have another question for you. Can a person be infected with coronavirus more than once?
Yes, by different variants, yes. Suppose if you're infected by one virus variant and then you developed antibodies and you recovered from it, then if it's a different variant, then that variant can infect. But if you're vaccinated or if you already have antibodies, you may not develop severe illness. Depending on the severity of the variant which is infecting you, it may not be severe enough for you to go to the hospital or die during that episode second time with another virus. Those chances are less. Majority of them with a different variant, you should be able to fight it out with a mild infection. It's almost similar to when you have antibodies from vaccinations. You could get a variant from a different virus, but it will pass like a mild or asymptomatic disease, but you could still spread that to the other person. That's what like the social distancing, mask wearing and isolation comes into place if you're dealing with a variant.
Thank you. And one other very interesting question that is very frequently asked is, can a person be infected with coronavirus after vaccination?
Yeah, again, with a different variant, it's possible because like right now we have data for certain 6 months to a year only. All these virus evolving, like we have Pfizer and Moderna, and the studies are still ongoing. And right now, we believe at least 6 months the immunity is going to last, or longer than that. Still don't know whether it's a lifelong immunity, what we are carrying from the vaccination. There are, with the variants, like there may be a chance, like you may need another dose also as a booster. So you could get an infection from a variant, but still, once you are vaccinated, your severity is going to be really low. It's not going to be a severe infection like the first time infection with the COVID infection. It's a mild disease, or you may pass as asymptomatic. Or if you have a lot of comorbid conditions, you may develop a little moderate disease, but it may not translate into significant mortality, at least so far from the data what we have.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Sujanti. Can you please summarize the main points that we have discussed today as a take home for all the viewers that we have here?
Sure, absolutely. So I would like to show these pictures as a summary. If you look at this picture, it's giving you the viral load, which I talked about a little while ago. So if you look at here, that the pre-infectious period, which I talked about, when you're exposed to a virus, your infection like starts going up about 1 to 3 weeks, you start producing your virus. Your viral load goes up, the blue bars. So that's where the rapid antigen testing become positive at the top. And then you are very infectious during that period where there are pink boxes. And then after that, you're not infectious after a certain time, but your RT-PCR will be positive from the beginning itself all the way through and then later on. So that's what the RT-PCR testing is. It's during infection also positive, and then like post-infectious period, sometimes people are positive for a longer period of time. So that's one of the testing strategies we use, but the actively infect period is during when your viral load is very, very high. So during that time, like you have to isolate when you have, especially these new strains coming up from India. And the vaccines are made through different mechanisms and different platforms made, but these are mRNA vaccines. There are DNA vaccines also. And some of the inactive vaccines or live attenuated vaccines is the one which India is using it mainly. It's a inactivated virus, which is, these are the Covaxins and Sputnik. Those are the vaccines of India. But if you look at the data that people who are vaccinated, they're pretty much, their post-vaccination infection rate is quite low, significantly low. So that's a good news. And then there are different vaccines which are compared to that, like the Sinopharm, there's an inactivated vaccine, similar vaccine is used here also. So one of the summaries, like, you avoid touching the face, you do the hand washing frequently, stay away from infected people, avoid social gathering, and use the face mask. This is very important. This is how you protect you and your family to avoid close contacts, crowded space you avoid, and hand hygiene performance. This is the virus which is like causes a multi-system organ disease. This is the virus with the nucleocapsid protein and then RNA, and it causes significant oxidative stress in the body. So oxygen is the one which becomes water, and then people who have diabetes and hypertension, they are vulnerable, and obese patients. This is one of the slides which I show one of the x-rays. When you get bad lung infection, this is what happens. If you look at the x-rays, like pretty much infected both white areas in the lungs, and it gets worse and lower down, like with severe infection. So those are bad infections patients develop as a respiratory illness. And it can cause clots in the lungs also. That's what the CAT scan shows down there also, it's clots. And it affects the cardiovascular system. It affects every part of the system, like you can have heart attacks, you can have pericardial disease, You can have myocardial disease, heart failure, cardiogenic shock, and rhythm disturbances. So this is heart attacks and patient needs cardiac cath, or it can affect the abdomen, like, people develop abdominal obstruction, GI symptoms, perforations of the gut, which can happen, or neurological symptoms are very common too. That's you can have strokes, altered mental status, encephalitis. Now, loss of smell is very commonly reported, but those are serious side effects of neurological illnesses, seizures, and encephalopathy. And it does affect the kidneys. These are the biopsy slides of the kidneys in patients with renal disease with the COVID infection. It affects significantly, and those are the biopsy reports which shows in acute renal failure and COVID infection. So pretty much the people who are high risk is important to remember, who have diabetes, high blood pressure, you have kidney disease or chronic lung disease, asthma, if you're obese person or cancer, or older adults, they are more affected. So those are the major points mainly. And then one of the important factor is like to get vaccinated. So if we could vaccinate majority of the population, but at least like 50 to 60% or 70% of the population, then that might help prevent the spread of the pandemic. And in India, the population is as big as 1.4 billion populations, barely 3.4% is vaccinated at this time. At the same time, if the vaccination rollout gets escalated, there may be some hopes to arrest this pandemic a little sooner than what we are seeing at this time. So that's very, very important. So people need to be encouraged to get any type of vaccine which is available, because all of them are very, very effective in preventing death and bad disease, severe disease. So the side effects from the vaccines are pretty minimal, that you would get it from any viral illness or any other vaccines. Important thing is to prevent this deadly disease, which is affecting more population, more people to die, as well as very high infectious rate. That's how it became a pandemic. So vaccination should be the key, should play the key role in prevention of another third wave.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sujanti, for your time and all your expert advice. Today, we got a great chance to look at the coronavirus situation in India from Kavita, from her first-hand experience. And then we got a great piece of information from coronavirus expert Dr. Sujanti from the US, who handled a similar situation last year here in the US. Hope this information is quite helpful for all the viewers. And thank you all for your time. From Mana TV and Mana TV International, signing off, Venkat Reddy Kotta.